Well, as many of you know, the San Francisco Bay Area is renowned for its innovation, creativity, and being ahead of the curve when it comes to trending the future, be that the future of business, the future of philanthropy, the future of the church. Our guest speaker today, Dave Batstone, is one who represents these Bay Area qualities better than anyone I know. Dave is a professor, entrepreneur, nonprofit president, investment banker, and most importantly, a Westmont alum. He's a professor at the University of San Francisco who graduated with 2 degrees in theology, only to end up teaching in the business department at the University of San Francisco. He is founder and president of the Not For Sale campaign, Right Reality, and a number of for-profit business ventures around the world. If anything, Dave is about working at the intersections of life, faith, and culture. The intersections where business world, nonprofit world, and church world come together. A place where creativity, innovation, and fresh response to global problems comes to the forefront. Dave is one of the most energetic, engaging, creative, and inspiring people I know and have known for over 30 years. I think you'll find him to be all of these qualities this morning. So won't you join me in welcoming our Bay Area brother, Dave Batstone.
It is great to be back in Santa Barbara. For 4 years, I sat in the pews, the seats that you're in. And the only difference was that, unlike you, I didn't have a clue about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. You see, I didn't know what major I wanted to be, and I know that is so laser focused for all of you here today. But, I chose psychology because there's 2 reasons I chose psychology. One is I got to train a rat. I learned that I would get my own rat for the semester, a little white mouse. Now, I don't actually like mice, and I don't like rats, but I thought it was really cool to be able to train this mouse how to move around in a cage. And I don't know if you still do this in experimental psychology here, but we had a little Skinner box. And so what you were able to do is that you would reward the mouse wherever it would end up, and it would behave in a way that would get its reward. So if you start rewarding it for hanging out in the left corner of the box, he'd hang out there. And then you'd give a pellet when he started to move to the middle, he would stay in the middle. Right? Then I threw a marble in there, and I waited until he put a paw on the marble, then I reward him. So then now, he's pawing that marble the whole time. Then I waited, and I don't reward him, so they start frantically looking to do something, kind of like I was doing with my major. Right? So they're frantically trying to do something, so then they puts both paws on this marble, I reward him. Then I wait until he stands up and walks around in the cage. And then I put a little basket in there. I kid you not, I put a basket in there. I waited, and it dunked the basketball. I taught my rat to play basketball. All right, that was one reason I chose to be a psychology major. The second is I wanted to learn how far off of the abnormal psychology mean I really was. And if you get to study abnormal psychology, oh my gosh, you'll see yourself all over that book. So I read it and think, well, that's kind of like me, not quite. No, I'm a little, yeah, that's me right there. So I learned something about myself. I'm not bipolar, I'm tripolar. And I lived it out the rest of my life till today. I couldn't focus. And I thought there was something wrong with me. I felt like God was telling me, yes, you're really good at creating wealth in business. You should be an investment banker. And that's what I did. You're really good at writing, and you can teach, so I became a professor. And you love the poor, and you really care about human rights, so I started a human rights agency. But I did all 3 at once. For 20 years, I was tripolar. There is not even a category in the book for that yet. And you know what? It took an unbelievable, unusual experience to bring me back into integration. And that was God bringing something into my life that I didn't expect. In a restaurant in San Francisco, I learned that there was a thing called human trafficking. But when I talk about human trafficking today, and Not for Sale is my organization, we fight human trafficking all over the world, modern slavery, forcing people to do something against their will, taking away their freedom. Before I talk about it, I want to talk about my problem, looking at this as a tripolar personality. You see, first, as a banker, as an investment banker, I've got a real problem. There's a $32 billion industry that I'm fighting. That's an annual $32 billion of revenue, which is more than Starbucks, Google, and Nike put together what they generate in revenue each year. That's what traffickers make, $32 billion. That's an FBI statistic. All right, now meanwhile, they are taking advantage of, they're exploiting 30 million people. Can you imagine that you own a small ice cream store and you hire people to scoop ice cream all day and you hire people to be a part of the business? Meanwhile, down the block, you have someone who also has an ice cream store that is forcing people to work. They're not paying them anything. They're slaves. How are you going to compete with that ice cream shop? And that's what's happening in the world today. I'm competing against criminals who make $32 billion by using 30 million people they do not pay. In fact, that they every day wake up and force them to work. This can be all over the world. Rug looms in Nepal, rice mills in India, brothels in Los Angeles. In fact, last week here in Santa Barbara, there was a bust for a human trafficker forcing a young girl from the age of 12 to sell her body for him. She was 17. 5 years, this girl was under his serfdom. So meanwhile, on my side, on my team, my competition, what we're going to bring to the game is $100 million, adding all the groups that fight slavery in the world today. International Justice Mission, IJM, Not for Sale, Polaris. You add all of those groups together, including the U.S. State Department office that fights human trafficking. You put all of us together, our total budget is $100 million. We pay small wages in general. We're nonprofits. We're overworked, overextended, and we depend on volunteers. Who do you think is going to win that battle? 100 million against 32 billion. We need to reinvent what it means to change the world. And that, if you don't hear anything else today, it's what does it mean to reinvent ministry, charity, mission? How do we rethink the ways? Because, you know, I don't want to come back to Westmont when your kids are going here, and I don't want to tell your children how bad the world is. I want to tell them what we did in our generations to fight major problems. I don't want to talk to you about needs today. I want to talk to you about solutions. And in order for us to actually address the global problems that we're facing, it's going to require a reinvention of how we think about charity, philanthropy, and business. You see, when I learned that there was human trafficking in the United States, it was in my local restaurant in San Francisco. It was a restaurant I used to love to go and get the tandoori chicken, the papadums. I just loved the food. I didn't recognize that the young kids who were serving me were slaves. Over 500 teenagers from the area of India, of Bangalore, came into the United States. They were trafficked and forced to work, first in the restaurant, then taken out into the fruit and vegetable fields of California, construction crews, brothels of Northern California. My own backyard, slavery in the 21st century. Their freedom taken away, forced to work, their families threatened if they tried to run away. They'd be hurt back in India. So, I don't know. My mother and I have this debate. You see, I think it's a blessing, and she thinks it's a curse that I was born with curiosity. Because I can't find something. God brings something into my life. I have to ask why. You see, you're probably like me. You're looking for some sign. You're looking for some guidance. You're looking for, what should I do with my life? And I got to tell you, don't worry about it. God's going to bring you things. It's just whether or not you're going to like the question He asks you. We think we ask God questions. God asks us questions. God brings things into your life. It's just whether or not you see them. You see, San Francisco is a wonderful place. You should come to the urban program. It's very eccentric in some ways. And so the fact that there's this crazy restaurant that has all of this trafficking going on, I could have said, wow, that's the Bay Area for you. But for some reason I heard God asking me a question. What are you going to do about this? So I took my tripolar butt and got into gear. I said, okay, God, I'm going to go around the world. I'm going to track this slavery. I'm going to move from this Indian restaurant. I'm going to go over to India. And then in Los Angeles, there's a factory where 70 women from Thailand were forced to work for 5 years in a factory. They were locked in. I'm going to go over to Thailand. And I'm going to go from the East Coast where I met these families that kept house slaves, house servants from Africa. I'm going to go to Africa. I took a year off from my university and my investment bank. And I said, I'm going to find out how human trafficking, modern slavery can work in the 21st century. I didn't have all the skills that Liam Neeson hadn't taken, but I was going to do my darndest to figure out what I could do. So I took one step. I said, okay, God, I'm going to take this one step. And I'm going to write up what I find, because if I'm shocked about this, and I've been out doing international banking work all over the world, and I'm shocked by this, I'm sure there's other people that are shocked as well. I'm going to write up this story. And so that was my one step. I was going to take a year off, come back, and go on with my life. I was doing well in investment banking. I was now a full professor, and I was writing books. I was happy. I was not looking for something. Seriously. But God had a bigger plan for me. So are you looking for what God's bringing into your life? I kid you not, God's going to bring something in your life this week. It's just whether you see it or not. It's whether you have the ears to see, the eyes to speak. So, I meet this woman in northern Thailand, all right? I go over to Thailand because I'm tracking down slavery. And I meet this woman, and her name is Krunam, and she kind of was like me. She was a painter, she was an artist, and she met these young kids that were sleeping by the riverfront in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. So she was going to teach them how to paint. And she took her canvases, empty canvases, tins of paint, just went down to the river and said, I want to know your stories. And as they started painting, these nightmares appear on the canvas. And so she said, where do these stories come from? You're like 10 or 11 years old. She said, we're not from Thailand. We're from Vietnam. We're from Cambodia. We're from China. Well, how did you get here? And they began sharing with her how they had been trafficked, sold, brought into Thailand, taken to karaoke bars where men from all over the world would come and do things to them that they would be arrested for doing back in Germany, the United States, Japan. Sex trafficking of children. Well, she was so incensed. That night, she ran into the first karaoke bar she could find. She saw two little girls and a little boy talking to an adult client. She just grabbed them and ran out. It's not the most sophisticated intervention strategy. Don't do that in Santa Barbara tonight. The next day, she goes into another karaoke bar, grabs these kids, she runs out. Now, when I meet Krunam, she's got 27 kids. No plan. She's living in an empty field in the north of Thailand, and these kids, they've got these palm leaves over their head and a dirt floor that they're sleeping on. And I'm like, no, God, listen, I said I'd write a book. But what do you do when you meet a woman like this, so heroic? And if you know much about Southeast Asia and the Buddhist tradition, monks and nuns will go and beg for their food. It's part of their religious discipline. Well, Krunam would take the kids and beg the monks and nuns for the food that they had begged for. And the monks and nuns were taking care of these kids. That's the only way they were surviving. So, okay, I said, listen, all right, Krunam, I'm so inspired. I promise you, I'm writing this book, I'm going to take the proceeds and build you a home for you and your kids. All right, step 2. You see, we think like these saintly, heroic actions are like people who are extraordinary. No, they're people who take one step at a time and wish they hadn't taken that step. In fact, I was ready for the 2 steps back, 1 step forward model of discipleship. And so I said, okay, But seriously, I'll build you a home. So I come back to San Francisco, I'm writing my book, I'm in chapter 2, and I get a phone call from Kunam and said, David, you know those 27 kids? Now there's 53. And I'm thinking, this better be one darn good book. Okay, I'll build you 2 homes. All right, I'll build you 2 homes. I'm now writing with new determination. This is how I type. I'm really focused. I'm inspired now. I got to make this a really good book. I don't have so many families and friends that are going to buy this book, right? I'm in the final chapter. Kunam calls me. David, I've rescued 88 children. I'm like, slow down on the rescues already. I start Not For Sale as an organization to raise funds to be able to build a village for Kunam and her kids. And what's great, you go there today, there's an extraordinary village where some of these kids who I met many years ago, they were sleeping in the dirt, they're now going to university. They're being trained as solar technicians. They are changing the world, these kids. Over 150 kids are living in that village, and then a new group comes in every day. That inspired us. It was a lot of Westmont students behind that. Ali Trowbridge, graduate, about 7 years ago, was our first employee. Westmont grad who came and really developed a whole brand and message, and well, she did just about everything. She was quadrupolar. So, as we began to look at that, we thought it was extraordinary. We learned one thing. One is that, okay, we felt great about having compassion, pulling bodies out of the river as they're drowning in northern Thailand. And you know what? I do believe God gave us the gift of compassion, the gift to have empathy, the gift to reach out and give charity. And we should never try to suppress that gift that God's given us. But I also knew rationally that even though I was pulling those bodies out, they were not stopping. They kept falling in upstream. And I needed to walk upstream. I needed to figure out why so many kids in the world today are being taken advantage of. That's justice, to find out why and do something about it. We need to be practicing compassion, and we need to be practicing justice. So justice is taking that 100 million and doing something about it. 100 million is charity. What does it mean now to practice justice? Not For Sale, we grew. We now operate all over the world, but we had to change our model, our business model along the way, and I want to share that with you. It started for us trying to figure out a solution for kids, like these ones in Peru. We built a shelter, just like in Thailand. We had hundreds of kids go through our shelter, but as we learned more about these kids, literally upstream, we learned that many of them were coming from the Amazon region of Peru, where there's illegal mining, illegal logging, a lack of rule of law. In other words, where someone who is poor can expect a court or someone wearing a uniform to listen to them. It's the persistent widow over and over again. She's pounding on the door and the judge will not come down. As Jesus taught us long ago, the poor get no justice. That's why I need you, my children, says Jesus, to be my feet, my hands in the world. So justice upstream, what does that look like? Well, I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure, but I did know that these kids were moving from one form of exploitation in the Amazon. Now they were in slavery in Lima, in the capital city. So how do you attack slavery at its roots? Well, I don't think I was smart enough to figure how to make that link between the Amazon, Madre de Dios, and Lima. So what I did is I decided, I still go, I guess. Next week I'm going to the Clinton Global Initiative in New York. I go to Davos, it's a World Economic Forum. But there's something about those events that really turned me off, because it's almost like plumage. Everyone's like showing all their feathers when they speak. And then you walk away and nothing happens. Well, look, this is how I think. What's Davos? It's this little town in Switzerland never heard about until they started having the World Economic Forum there. Well, I live in a little town in California. It's called Montera. I'm going to develop the Montera Forum. I'm going to invite the 50 most influential people I know, and I'm going to have them brainstorm with me. Okay, what do you know? Who do you know? What you've been successful in your life. It's like a professional baseball player for the Giants. There was the guy who started Twitter. There's people who run the iApp for the iPhone, a Westmont grad. couple billionaire investors. So, you know, I didn't know you, so those are the 50 people I knew. Maybe one or two of you would have gotten in. And I was really good at this point of knowing how to really engage in forced labor, so I locked them in a room for 24 hours. And I said, listen, in the next 24 hours, help me figure out a solution for this problem in the Amazon area. And this is the video I showed them that you're going to see now to help give them a context for understanding what needs to be done.
The Peruvian Amazon is one of the most ecologically wealthy places on the entire planet, and yet the people are some of the poorest in the world. There's something wrong with that picture.
The communities in the Peruvian Amazon are 7 hours from the nearest city upriver. The only way to get there is by boat, and the community members can't even afford to own a boat.
They don't have access to marketplace. They don't have healthy jobs in their own community. So traffickers come in.
He sido explotado. He trabajado día y noche, las 24 horas.
It's happening, and primarily because there's a lack of economic opportunities for work.
When we looked at the Amazon region, we saw rich resources. We saw people who desperately wanted to work and build a new future.
We knew there had to be a solution to the problem. The only question is, what would that solution be?
Part of the solution we came up with was relatively simple. It was to provide villagers a boat. But what happens when the boat wears out? How do we create not a charity-based model, but a sustainable model?
It's creating jobs. Unfortunately, to create jobs is a pretty complex process. You need to engage the communities themselves. You need to engage local businesses that are creating products. You need to engage international retailers like supermarkets, and you also need to engage consumers to understand why it's important and why they should be buying these types of products. What we came up with was an incredible idea that would link all of those actors together, and what we came up with was Rebel.
Okay, so the first night, showed them the video about what was happening in Peru, even brought some tribal groups that we had established some very strong relationships with at Not For Sale. And then the next day we said, when you come here, we need you to put your best thinking on. We're going to break you into groups and we're going to brainstorm from the business world, the cultural world, the social world. We need you to bring together a plan. And I don't know what possessed me, but I said, and whatever you come up with on Monday morning, my staff will execute on. It was a really stupid idea because they came up with a beverage. You're going to see the play of how that happened.
So we were joking around and we said, what if we locked all of the smartest business leaders that we know in one room and had them solve all of our problems for us? And that's pretty much what we did. We gathered top leaders from business and culture, and we broke them into small groups, and we asked them to compete to come up with the best business model to create jobs in the Amazon.
One of the most extraordinary groups in terms of the range of characters in it included a lawyer, it included the founder of an online healthcare company, it included an agronomist, and a baseball player.
These are large people in large corporations, and they're brilliant minds, and they've got brilliant ideas. I didn't go to college. I signed out of high school. I don't have a business degree in anything. I was out of place, I really was. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer.
The guy from the online health company started to look on Google and found out that there was this unusual plant called cat's claw that came out of the Amazon.
And I was sitting there and I was drinking tea. I remember I was getting into this tea concept, and I just said, hey, can you do an herbal tea? Like, can you make this a tea? And we all just looked at each other, and we were like, man, that's actually an interesting thought.
It's a tea company that sources ingredients in the Amazon and creates jobs. That's the idea that eventually became Rebel.
Within an hour, we created this whole business idea around this tea, and then we had to present it, and they made me present it, and I don't know anything about presenting that kind of stuff.
And Rebel won because it was so practical in creating jobs for the people in that region. It linked a consumer up with a producer, someone who wanted to be involved in changing the world with the people who most needed that change.
The next thing I know, I'm getting stuff in the mail, and Dave asking me if I want to invest in the tea. And I actually was like, what tea? You know, at first. And he's like, the tea idea you came up with. And I'm like, you're actually running with that? So now I got bragging rights. It was my idea, you know?
Jeremy Affeldt, pitcher for San Francisco Giants, using the gifts God gave him he didn't even know he had. And that's what it's about to reinvent philanthropy. We brought minds together. You see, you think that you're following a particular discipline or strategy around your major. I'm going to be a sociology major, international politics, business. I got to tell you something, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Pursue with passion and curiosity whatever God puts in front of you. That's your pathway. You know, recent studies show that in your lifetime, just given your generation where we are at in history, you'll have 4 careers. That we're moving into a tripolar world. Not 4 jobs, 4 careers. So what's important is that you follow your passion. You were given a passion. You were given curiosity. Follow that like the people at my event. Share that with each other. And what happens is you have this beverage. It was crazy. On Monday morning, I woke up and said, all right, guys, I know we're fighting slavery, but now we got to start a beverage company. So what did I do? You know, I was in my nonprofit mind because that's what you do to solve social problems. Okay, now if I could somehow, you know, get my pastor, to, maybe he could be CEO, or maybe I get my social worker to be, so what am I thinking? I'm an investment banker. I'm going to go out and raise private equity. I'm going to recruit the best CEO. I went out and found the guy who won the Academy Awards of the beverage industry. I'm sure you go to that. He won the best drink last year. And I said, I'm going to get that guy. So I go to him and I said, look, I'm going to give you equity in the company. I'm going to give you a salary competitive with any other beverage company. But you've got to do something even more special. You've got to create a drink that changes the world. He goes, I'm in. You see, when we change the business model, now I'm bringing private equity capital. Let's say in 5 years, this drink, Rebel, is now worth $120 million, which Honest Tea is after 5 years. Then I have now generated more revenue through one product than the entire nonprofit government response to human trafficking today. And Rebel is something you can get in Santa Barbara because we are all over California after 18 months of product development, marketing, and delivery. We're in every Whole Foods in California. We're one of the top-selling drinks in California today. Rebel, roots, extract, bark, berry, and leaves. Be a rebel with a cause. Don't drink the same old crud. Why would you drink a Coca-Cola, for goodness sakes? It's got 17 little sugar cubes in it. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people who make it. Drink a Rebel. 16 herbal tonics, like a Red Bull herbal. The people who are making the drink are getting jobs now. And the people who are actually drinking it feel good about themselves and they know more about human trafficking. The profits go back to buy more boats, more education, more training. We just got started. Allie and I now are running 7 companies. All of them aligning the mission of those companies, 1, to be profitable, 2, to generate revenue back to not for sale. It blows your category. So it really doesn't matter what you're studying, but it does matter immensely. You see, I used to sit in chapel. I was right where you were. And people would come and talk about missions. They say, you know, God wants you to be a part of the kingdom. And I would think, thank goodness I'm not one of those people. I'm going to law school. That ministry stuff sounds really hard, low pay, no status, and burnout. And somehow I felt like I was off the hook because God doesn't need people like me. I'm a lawyer, but I'll make sure I pray and tithe. I don't know what Bible that's in because it's not the one that I get to read every day. You see, God wants you, and God needs you for the world today. Tell me your major, I need you. All right, in the Amazon, I need people who know social analysis and can do metrics on the impact we have quarter by quarter. And we share that with our Rebel investors, our consumers, and our donors to Not for Sale. So we're measuring impact. I need people who can deliver primary service, who can work with kids and women effectively, training. I need business professionals who know how to create business models. I need new lawyers who are recreating corporate law to enable not for sale and for-profit investors to live happily together. You tell me your profession, I need you. because I'm working globally. Don't believe the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times when they say this is a terrible time to graduate from college because all of your colleagues who got out are unemployed. Don't believe it, because this is the best time to graduate. It's a global world that needs your skills. It's just what your horizon is, what you want to get out of life. You see, I learned long ago that I'm not for sale. I got an incredible destiny that God gave me. And I really feel fortunate. I feel blessed that I came to Westmont College that was preparing me for that destiny. And I learned long ago that you are not for sale. It's such a precious thing to be able to have skills, be alive, to enjoy the world that God has created and be a part of that recreation every day. And I really ask you to join me to make sure that there is no woman, there is no man, there is no girl, there is no boy in this world today that shall be for sale. Because God has said, I have created everyone, I have cherished everyone with a gift, and that person is my child. So friends, colleagues, Westmonsters, I'm not for sale. Thank you very much. God bless you. May you have a great time.